Hey guys, welcome to Staying Strong with Ashley. I'd like to introduce my guest, Nissi. She is a wonderful friend of mine from Minneapolis, Minnesota. We've known each other for quite a few years. And so I just want to bring her on to kind of discuss how to become a friend. And that involves how to become a personal friend, but also a friend with someone who has lost children. So I'm going to let her speak and kind of discuss, and then we'll have kind of a back and forth discussion, see how things go, on what sort of questions she has for me and then I have for her. And yeah, we just hope that this encourages you to be a better friend to those around you and those who have lost any sort of children. All right, Nissi, you want to start?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, so I know Ashley from 6 years. I'm not a native Minnesotan, but I moved here from India, and I didn't have a lot of friends. So Ashley was one of the first persons who literally opened her arms, and just her friendship made me made me so comfortable just living here, but also just her vulnerability made me want to know her more, and and made me be vulnerable to her of what I was going through or things like that. So that's how our friendship started, and and just her courage made me so attracted to her. I'm like, man, this woman just has such amazing faith and courage. And once she was open to me about her stillborn babies and kids, there were a few things, I think, as a single woman who has never been pregnant, I don't know how to ask or how to relate or what questions to ask. So there was a learning curve, and also to know what kind of friend I can be, or especially during the moments where um, it's just it's just hard, I guess. So there were a few questions I think I was comfortable asking Ashley. There were a few that I wasn't. So I thought we could talk about those and then just see how we, as Ashley rightly put, how we all can be good friends to people around us, especially with amazing women who are going through miscarriages or stillborn or so many other things.
Yeah, for sure. What were some questions that you felt comfortable asking me?
I think I was very mindful. I think I was very, as soon as you shared, I became very cautious, because I think most of the time, you don't want to, you're almost thinking like, I don't want to cause trauma to the other person by reliving all those experiences. So I never asked about what you went through, but I would just say, would you like to talk about it more? And then you would open up. I think that was my first comfort. And though I wanted to ask more, but I also was thinking about what's the right time, what's the right location. So I refrained from asking a lot of questions, but I would also be okay with, share what you want to at this moment. Then I had to like weigh out, like, is this okay, the doubt or the question I have, is it important now after someone has been so vulnerable and open? So the questions would be more of, I wanted to ask more technical questions, like maybe the science or I'm like, okay, why did it happen 3 times or whatever? But I knew it was not the right time, because that was the first time you were sharing with me. So what kind of reactions do you usually get from, maybe because I'm a woman, I would say, from women?
So it really depends on people, honestly. I think what you said was very good. I just want to point that out so people are aware. When you ask someone, tell me how you're feeling, like tell me more, and just offer the opportunity to share how much they feel comfortable sharing. It allows, at least me personally, the chance that you want to hear everything, or as much as I'm okay with sharing, so that you didn't shy away. So for you personally, when you asked those and you kind of allowed me to share, your reaction was, I don't want to say stoic, but it was just very curious. And it really allowed me to know that you were more invested than in just about like, oh, so I can get certain like turnoffs of like, oh, that seemed way too much. Okay, I won't talk to you again. Or even like things like the, you know, like I just like, it's so hard. And I can, like, the thing is that when people do that, they don't think you can see them. Even if it's for a split second, you can see their reaction in their eyes, because it tends to go like their face, and then they go, oh yeah, no, you know, and you can see that. And so it's hard to not see that. And so if you come from a curious point of it instead of a very uncomfortable point of it, it makes it easier for, at least for me personally, to share, which has allowed me to share with you on many levels, even the science of it, of things, which even to this day, I'm not sure why it took 3 times. So like, I get asked that a lot, actually, ironically. That's the one thing I get asked a lot. Like, why did it take so long? Like, if it's a spontaneous incompetent cervix, like people can find that. Like, it is true. You can find that on an ultrasound. Why did it take so long? And I still, to this day, have no answer. So I just say, well, I'm not sure, you know? But yeah, I think that's true. Most of people I've met want to explore to others and tell them everything, but we also don't want to overwhelm our friends. And so having the opportunity at different times that allow the whole thing to happen versus all at one time can probably break it up a little bit better to in more of a friendship mode. So what things were you a little uncomfortable with me sharing, or even just asking in a time?
Yeah, I think especially when you're so vulnerable and talking about uh, uh, your babies, I think the first thing is like, okay, should I offer like the first reaction is, should I offer sympathy? Or I can't empathize because I've not been pregnant. So my initial knee-jerk reaction is, oh, should I show sympathy? But then I think me, just being very analytical at this point, it's like, yeah, there are physical ailments that people talk in a way, and there's right now, even in the world, we are growing to talk more about mental health issues. And then sometimes I don't know where to put like miscarriages and stillborn babies in which category, or not that we have to categorize, but it's like, okay, when someone is sharing something so deep and personal, um, I don't know exactly how to react. I don't know if it's you want my friend sharing it wants me to keep listening, or to ask more questions, or just be there standing for them. So those are the things I still don't know sometimes. When you share about uh, birthdays, I still sometimes I still find, or I still don't have words how to frame what to tell you, or what would encourage you.
Yeah, I think that's important though. So it's hard to say specifically, because I feel like every time is a little different and each person's a little different. But I think an overall thing, sympathizing is always good, but to sympathize in more of a curious way. So don't be like, oh, I'm really sorry, and then like just leave it at that, because I don't know how to reply, like, thank you. And then I just like, I'm like, I don't like, so it's like, oh, that sounds like it's really hard. Do you want to pray? Or, it sounds like you're going through a really hard time. Do you want to tell me more about that? Like, like, oh, that seems really sad, and I'm really sorry for that. can you explain how you're feeling right now? You
Mm-hmm.
know, or, and I think sometimes even asking the direct question of what is it that you need right now? Sometimes I'll say, I don't know. Sometimes I'll be like, oh, okay, well, I just need you to listen. I just need a hug, or, and those are okays. But I think being even a little bit more direct is, what is it that I can do for you?
Mm-hmm.
We all have a gut feeling. God tells us a lot of things of what we can do for other people. And I think sometimes listening to that is very helpful. On the birthdays portion and angelversaries, it depends on every day. What I like is not what everyone likes, but I always like to be, I don't want to say acknowledged, but I want them to be acknowledged. So for people to message me and say, hey, I know today's Lily's or AJ's or Logan's day, how are you doing? Like, I just want to check in, happy angelversary or whatever. Those are things that make me feel encouraged, even if someone couldn't do something big, like if I have a balloon release or a flower planting, or, those are small things for me. And I know it's helped other people. I've also had people say, hey, I know it's the day of the, it's their day. I lit a candle for their honor. And, I prayed for you. And so small little trinkets are very helpful, but that's also something that we don't talk about because we don't want to make people feel uncomfortable or obligated. Like, I don't want to, like, as a friend, I don't feel like you're obligated to do something for me, but I don't want you to feel obligated because you feel sad. I want you to do it because you're my friend and you want me to feel better.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are
Good point. I think sometimes you're just afraid to
mm-hmm.
ask that. It's like, yeah, because again, it's so hard to put through. Like even though it's been years that you've gone through, it's like, okay, so what place is Ashley at? It's like, and that's why I bring back the reference of physical ailment, right? Like, oh yeah, someone had a horrible accident and they've recovered, or their thing again. So sometimes it's hard to relate with stillborns or miscarriages. Like, okay, we don't know exactly because it's, as you said, it's not talked about more, or what exactly women or men go through.
Yeah, that's true. We're not talked about a lot. Like, it's a very taboo subject around the world and around the church, and especially for men, it's super, super taboo, which makes it really hard on me because I think that everyone should express their feelings as much as possible. But I do have something I want to ask you too, is when I told you all these things, even if it was, little bits at a time, what was your reaction, or how did you feel right away? Did you need time to process, or were you just like, oh no, I understand, like I get the emotion behind it? Or
I think my personality, I did take time to process. I think initially when you said, I was very cautious of what I was going to say my next sentence or things like that. Because it's very hard to process. It's like, because till now I'm knowing you as a friend, right? Like you're the other things. And when you shared something so deep and personal, I was very cautious. But I think it's the second or the third time I remember, I was okay, even asking you questions, because the process, or at least the process I had, was someone is so vulnerable and open for a reason. It's not, if they didn't want to talk about it, they wouldn't, um, or they didn't find that space to talk about it. But when someone does that, you have to reciprocate in a way where it creates a space where they can be more open. So that was my thought process. Again, it wasn't an instant. It took me a few days to even process, like, what? Like, it's like, really? Um, so yeah, it did take me time to process.
yeah, I think that's good to know that, it takes people time to process when you explain it. It's not going to be immediate all the time. Like, I was very open and vulnerable with probably a few people at a time. And even then, I still knew that they had time to process what I was saying and my emotions and etc. But I also knew those people created open spaces for me throughout the time, like our friendship, we've created many open spaces for us to communicate a lot of different things that took time, but to have the open space of here's where I'm at, here's where I feel comfortable, and you allowing me to feel that comfortability of this is a safe space. We need safe space for many of us to say, hey, this is just where I'm at, whether it's with the kids, anxiety, other random things that are going in our lives, maybe depression. A safe, open space to communicate between friends is something we all desire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. I think, does it get exhaustive when people don't react the way you want?
I've learned to expect the unexpected.
Mm.
So at first, it was I was very turned off by it, because I assumed that those people didn't want to connect with me at all. And so I was very careful about, like, when it started, I was very careful about who I told certain things to, because I didn't want that reaction. I didn't want the reaction of like pity. I didn't want the reaction of scared and being alone. I had already felt being alone, and so I was very careful with that. It did get exhausting not being able to express it. So when things would come up, I was like, I just want to talk to people. I just want to celebrate, or I just want to do these things, and it was more exhausting to not be able to do that, versus the reaction. And so going through all the years that they've been gone, 8-9 years, it just has felt more like that I'm able to expect unexpected, which is lately been where people seem a lot more understanding and curious than they were, 5, 6, even 8 years ago. A lot more people were not. So we've gotten to a stage now where I think people are, at least when it comes to vulnerability, more people are at least a little bit more aware. But yeah, it was a little exhausting to just not be able to share, like, keep it very minimal instead of wanting to share with everyone just the whole story.
Yeah. Are there like any absolute no's, like when it comes to like asking questions?
I would say that if it's a new, fresh, like the baby just happened, like all these things, I would not go into explaining. I would not go into exactly saying like what happened, because at that time you can't, like, I couldn't even process what happened. Like, well, what happened? You're like, I don't know. I delivered a baby and it's not here. Like, why? Like, I don't know why, like, so like right away when it happens, I would not ask those. Like, you're curious and you want to know, but it's very hard for us to, like, we even need our own time to process what happened. The further along, the more it's easier. Personally, I feel like no question is out of reach, but I know there are a lot of people who probably don't think like that. I think in general, asking questions of like, where are you at? How do you feel? Like, trying to get them to open up a little bit more is easier than to ask, can you tell me the specifics? And I think asking why questions is very hard. Like, well, why? Why didn't the doctors catch it at the second time?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, the doctors didn't. So I think the why questions are a lot harder. I would also suggest that in the time that people are talking about whatever it is they are, that and you've been pretty good about this, hearing small little things. So like, oh, I'm just so run down. I feel exhausted, but I have all these things to do, but all I'm thinking about is the kids. Like, to realize that, oh, okay, they have all these things they need to do. Maybe I can help with those things, like, oh, hey, Ashley said she needs to get laundry done. Hey, like, I'm just gonna, hey, are you cool if I come over? Okay, hey, you know what? I thought I'd just do your laundry for you, like, because those things are a lot helpful, I think. And that just involves any friend, not just about this, but like any friend that's overwhelmed. We're overwhelmed with life. We're in a pandemic. Like, we're very much overwhelmed with stuff. So, like, small little things that we can do to just encourage one another is very helpful.
Yeah. And I don't know if you want to talk about it, but now that you're a single woman, and when you open up to men about it, how, like, yeah, how is it hard for you, easy for you, or even if someone wants to be a matchmaker for you?
So, it's harder. It's easier to open up to a woman because I think that in general, although we don't understand maybe why or what exactly the science behind what happened, we understand the emotions that would happen behind it. And so as opening up to a woman and I say, here's what happened, oh, okay, then the emotions behind it are very much, oh my gosh, like, how can I help them? Versus a man where it'd be, well, how can I fix it? And I'm not saying all men, I'm just saying this, and I know it's a very generalized statement, how can I fix it and stuff. So I don't tend to open up to men as often. I'm very careful. I'll start with things like, oh, I got divorced. If they ask about kids, oh, okay, I have 3 kids that passed away, if they start to ask more questions, I'll tell them more. The more I'm in a friendship or relationship with that person, or, have a connection, the more I'll open up to them. But as a man, as a woman who's talking to a man about these, it's it can be very off-putting. Because then that means, okay, well, can she have kids? Can she not have kids? Does she not want to have kids? Does she want to have kids? What's that look like? Because sometimes we're very trained in that a match is to create a family.
Yeah.
And so if they don't feel like that, it can be very off-putting. Also, unless the man is very in tune with their emotions, they don't know how to react and how to help me. And so I have to be very direct in, this is what I need from you, which in general is very hard for me because I have a very hard time telling people, here's exactly what I need from you. I don't want them to read my mind, but I also don't know how to express that. So yeah, it becomes very different. I think that it also leads into picking out girlfriends. When I have friends who are women, I start off I don't start off as slow. I'll start off with, hey, tell me something about yourself. Okay, like, I'm divorced and I have 3 kids that passed away. And their reaction kind of leads me to, well, where is our friendship going to go? Is it going to be very surface level? Or are we going to able to go at least a little deeper? I've had people who have been surface level and then throughout time have been deeper. But I don't open up to people all the time right away. I think that unless something gets brought up in the context, I've had someone say they were talking about someone else. Oh, okay, they had a stillborn. And then I'll say, oh yeah, I know what that's like. I've had 3. And so, so then in those contexts, I'll go from there. Whereas if it was just, why are you feeling very anxious or overwhelmed? Like, why are you lonely? Why, unless I have a slightly deeper connection, I'll just say, oh, due to my past or something. So I think building that connection is very helpful, but I also think men and women are built very differently. And usually the women have a very much strong emotional connection with understanding that versus men, but sometimes that can be flipped. And I always recommend to have men have understanding of their own emotions so you can understand someone else's, because it does build those deeper connections.
Yeah. I think one last question.
Okay.
Um, I think like you have your social circles, right? Be it the
Mhm.
church, your office space, your friend circle, or the society. I think where I mean, in all these circles, how do you think we can create that space, um, especially for women who have had stillborns or miscarriages? Because at many levels, it's a taboo.
Mhm.
Not many people are comfortable. And I also want to share one thing that Ashley shared that um, really, in a way, helped me um, build be more comfortable even asking questions. Is I think I asked Ashley, how are you so strong in your faith, or how did you connect to God even after going through this? And you shared something so beautiful. You were like, yeah, the only person I think can relate to my problem is God, because he lost his son. And that literally made me think at so much deeper level, but also to be so aware of how different people connect to faith, especially a woman who went through miscarriages or still or had stillborn babies.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's important is for me personally, like there was no one else who could feel exactly how I feel. Yes, my ex-husband could have very similar feelings and yes, everyone that's watching this, if you have a friend or you're going through something very similar, we have very similar feelings, but the only person who knew exactly what I felt was God. Because he lost Jesus, right? And then when I went through the Bible, I noticed that David lost his son um, uh, shortly after it was born. So in the Bible, I was able to connect even more and say, look, like these people, like David and God, like they know, and that's the only way I'm able to get through. Like I have no other option. In my mind, I had no other option, but also I'm like, if God knows, then even if no one else knows, it'd be fine. So just staying strong in that, um, just I think having the opportunity feel, um, to feel, each space that you talked about, work and church and friends, like each of them have their own way of comfortability. Work is a very hard one. Let's start with that one because you're supposed to be very professional. And so um, what happened was I actually didn't talk about it for a little bit, and it wasn't until I became very emotional that I would just end up saying I need that day off. Like I just need to take that day off. And then my boss would ask, well, like, why? Like it'd be like in the middle of the week. Why do you need a Wednesday off? And so then I'd say, that's the day my kid passed away. Like that's the day my daughter or my son passed away. And so then they would just be like, okay, yeah, you know. And the more that I grew in a relationship with my boss and then, other coworkers, the more that I was able to express, here's what I'm feeling. And soon I didn't have to take the days off. I would just take the day off because I wanted to have a day off, and that seemed like a good day. But I think in the work aspect is a very professional time, and to have a boss who was very connected and understanding that there are going to be times that are very hard was there. The coworkers of mine, they didn't understand, like most people don't understand exactly what happened, like and how that worked, and but they were understanding of most of the emotions, and that, hey, if I'd been feeling a lot of different things, missing them, wishing they were here, um, wishing I had a husband because I'm single, all those things, they were more understanding of that. And so if they allowed me to, they said, hey, if you need to talk, I'm here. And so I would tell them a little bit to see if they were real. Like, are you just saying that to say that? Because, and soon it became a better relationship than just a boss coworker. Like we turned into a community. When it comes to the church and friend circle, it's a very similar aspect. Everything is still very taboo in the world. But I think that having the space of, I'm here for you, like understanding that people grieve in a very different way, and each person has their different way of grieving, but that I'm here for you. I don't find it helpful, and I think many people don't find it helpful of, oh, well, my grandpa died, so I understand. Or, my dad died, so I understand. Like, you may have some similar death, like we've all gone through death, but losing a child and to me a marriage is a very different sort of category, as you said, than anything else. And so it's almost put in its own separate one. And so I think telling people, oh, well, I understand you, it's like hard because you don't understand. You know what I mean? Like even now when someone comes to me and says, I lost a child, I miscarried, I don't understand every emotion that they have because I'm not them. And I can say, I'm really sorry. I know what it's like to go through a very similar loss. Like I have 3 stillborns. It's a very similar loss. Tell me where you're at. Yeah. The church has grown and where they're at now. I think that the more that we're able to listen and then send scriptures, it's easier. For a while there, the church would just send scriptures and then they would sing the same ones. And I was like, these are not helpful, guys. I know the scriptures, but it's because no one knew how to deal with it. This is such a very uncomfortable thing that unheard of. And people who have heard of it or have dealt with it never talked about it. And so I know personally, like, because I'm so much more open than other people, it was very confusing for that. And so scriptures to them was just, here's where she what she needs. And I think that having a conversation of the open space of I'm here to listen and I'm only here to listen, and I will, any reaction that I have to you is out of curiosity and not as a taken abackness. And then through that saying, would you like to go through some scriptures together? I think that's a very honest way, because if you're just throwing scriptures at someone who has lost something or gone through something, it's not helpful for them to understand their own emotions through it. So, yeah.
Or, okay, this is my last one, I promise.
You keep saying that, but I know you too well. It probably isn't. But
no, I think especially how can we overcome these I don't like the word even being used that, oh, it's uncomfortable. It should be uncomfortable, I guess, and that's okay. How you think as your friends or just even the church community, how can, instead of just saying, oh, that's uncomfortable, or there are kids around, or they're young, it's not uncomfortable. It happens,
Right.
How can we again just make it not comfortable, I guess?
I think understanding, yeah, well, right. Understanding that life is uncomfortable. Everything we go through is very uncomfortable. What you've gone through by coming to the US from India, going through school, that's uncomfortable. And that's uncomfortable for you. Just like my stuff with the kids and stuff is very uncomfortable for me. And so sometimes we forget that our own personal life is uncomfortable. Like God didn't say that we're going to have a very comfortable life. It's just going to be, woohoo, we're just going to go. Everything's going to be daisies. Like that's just not how life is. And I think people forget that life is very uncomfortable. And because we are very uncomfortable and have stories that are deep and that affect us differently, we have to be okay with understanding that, God gave us a lot of skills and a lot of opportunities to be more empathetic and sympathetic with one another. And I think that using those opportunities to reflect that is one of the best ways to make sure we are dealing with the uncomfortableness of life. Some people's stories are a lot deeper. some people's stories are just like, oh, okay. But I think we learn from each other. When someone talks about something that makes you uncomfortable, like you're not sure how to react, you don't know what's happening, you're having a hard time processing it, even telling them, hey, I just like saying things like, thank you for sharing, that was very vulnerable of you, very brave, very courageous. Are you okay if I take some time to understand it more and process? Because I'd rather someone say, I need some time to process, than to completely cut me out until all of a sudden they're good, and then I'm like, what happened? You know? Like, when people share things that I am confused about, I'll even say, oh, can I ask more questions about that? Or is maybe another time okay? Because ultimately, I don't know where they're mentally at, you know? Maybe now's not the time to ask more questions, but I do have more questions to ask, so I'll write them down for another time, you know? So the life that we lead is like, currently everyone is going through a pandemic. It's very uncomfortable for most of us. We all have very different feelings on how we're going through this and how we proceed with it. And I think that continues with the rest of our lives. You know, the pandemic doesn't, but how we perceive things is very different. And so being able to understand and have an opportunity to say, either A, you need to process, or B, what does that, you know, like, where am I at? So I think sometimes we are afraid to ask more questions. We're afraid because, like you said, you didn't want to bring up trauma. Like, you don't want to make it more traumatic for me. You don't, you know, people don't say the baby's names because they don't want me to remember, or they don't want me to feel a certain way. But ultimately, that's funny because I don't feel that way. You know, the perception of what you might feel for me is different than what I actually feel, you know? Like, for you to say my baby's names makes me feel welcome and uplifted and better than not saying them at all, you know? Something that I think that we realize is that our own perception of what we may feel for that person is not really what they feel. And so we have to realize, like, we may be putting our own selves in their shoes and not putting ourselves with where they're at in their shoes, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I really like what you shared. Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah. What allowed you to feel more comfortable, I guess, or like be okay with me sharing as much as I have, even in the past, and coming to things such as the kids' anniversary stuff, even though you weren't sure about it?
Yeah, I think, going back to what you shared, it's mostly our processing, right? Like, for me to ask questions to myself, why are you uncomfortable having this conversation? Because you've not gone through, or you don't want to go through, or you know, it's like, but there's someone who's sharing what they're going through and are sharing their experience, and what makes you turn away. So I had to correct so much of myself, but one thing that really helped me was you articulated it so well, or you would be so calm when you shared. Not that it was required, but at that point it did help me to see, like, oh, Ashley is comfortable sharing all these things, so let me also be comfortable being uncomfortable and asking those questions, because I think that was the start. At least now I know it, how what questions to ask. Initially I didn't even know, but that you being so calm and open, that kind of did help me, and also questioning myself about why do I don't want to talk about it. Yeah.
I think that's something good. I never thought about that before, was that when I share, it's a very, like, I just share, not, I don't want to say factually, but I share very pretty calmly, unless I'm in my feelings, and then, just everything lets out for that. But most of the time, if I'm talking about it specifically, I have a very easy time of just, here's where things happened, and that's it, and have no emotion behind it, to allow that person to understand that even though there's emotions, that, here's what happened, here's where things are, here's what's been going on, and then the emotions will come when you feel comfortable, when you're okay with this portion. Because when you share, when I shared with people, okay, I lost 3 babies, here's everything, if I shared in the emotional part of it, then the comfort would come, but the curiosity would be away, because they would want to comfort me versus they just want to learn more about me personally and how to help me. So I've learned very much kind of share factually, and then move up to share emotionally when that person feels like, then you can see them processing it more. So, and having more of a dialogue, and understanding that. I think another thing is, each person, we have to meet people where they're at, right? So you happen to be at a very great stage for me at the time that I am constantly needing you, but sometimes there are people where they're not there. So if someone's already going through something very hard mentally, and you may not realize it right away, if I express things in a emotional state, that can cause them to have a harder time mentally in whatever they're dealing with. Mm-hmm. And so having the time to understand that people are at different stages of life, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and just knowing like, okay, this is kind of where this person is, and so that's where I'm going to go, and I'm going to meet them there, even with my stuff, and then when they move on, we'll keep moving forward with them. And I think that's important. Yeah. Did you ever feel like you could ask me things of like what I wanted to do for the kids' days, or anything like that, or was that kind of hard at first?
Yeah, I think it's again a personality thing, right? Like, I don't like celebrating that much, so, but knowing that, knowing you, because you're so, you're such an encourager, you remember birthdays, and just knowing how special it meant for you made me reevaluate a lot of things. I'm still not there. I miss your kids' birthdays, but whenever I can, I do try to be aware or mindful of what you would like doing, and putting what I would tend to do, right? So it's also to consider what the other person wants, especially however they want to celebrate, right? Like, someone want to celebrate it, maybe you can talk about it more, about just remembering the day more than celebration or whatever it is.
I mean, I think it depends on each person, honestly, on what they do. And each year for me is very different. But yes, I think taking that time to do that. I always recommend that someone do something in honor of their kids every year, even if it is just lighting a small candle or thinking of them or whatever, because it just reminds me personally that I'm very fearful that one day I'm going to forget them. And so every year it reminds me like, okay, they're there, I'm a mom, like I'm never going to forget them. And people could keep telling me over and over, you're never going to forget, but that's just a fear of mine. And so so that's what I have. And I think celebrating and remembering is very different, because I know that I have some family members who have a hard time with when I celebrate, because they think that it's not really like a celebration is something happy, and remembering and doing something on their day is very sad for them, and it reminds them too much of the loss versus me knowing that they've gone to heaven and I'll eventually be there. So, I just have to really be mindful of that and know that when those times come, that those people are where they are and to allow them grace. I think that's the biggest thing. Like when I used to have expectations, like I'm going to tell everybody, or I'm going to tell all these people, and then they're going to always message me. And then people would forget because we're human beings. And I would be very sad and upset and like, oh, no one loves me and no one reminds me. And, and I had to think back like, well, first of all, I've probably forgotten people's birthdays in general. And also like, this isn't about, like, this is about what I'm needing. And I have to be okay with that people aren't there. And to be reminded that I'm still blessed by people who did happen to remember or who are thinking of me even if they don't say it, right? Like, because there are people who probably do see it, don't want to, like, remind me of it because I already know, and they just don't say anything, versus saying something, which to me, I always feel like say something. But I think in general, like, just giving a lot of grace, forgiveness is a very big thing. Forgiving those people who have forgotten, and just know, like, and telling, I think that's the thing, telling people, if I don't tell someone, hey, this is what I need on this day, I need you to remember, I need you to just message me quickly and or just be available as you can on that day, then I'm going to get disappointed because I've never expressed that. I expect people to do something that I haven't expressed to them. And so that's what I've learned more and more, is to express my needs. Even in the tough times of not sure, I'll usually tell people, I'm not sure how I'm going to feel on this day. Could you check in on me? And if you're available, or could you kind of be available for most of the day in case I need you? And usually they check in, might not be available, but at least they can check in and see where I'm at, and if they can do something, they will. And so I think that's it, just kind of expressing that. But it took me years, a lot of years, and even now, it'll probably keep going, to not have expectations. Just expect the unexpected from people, because then you'll be pleasantly surprised. Yeah. So in regards to where we're at, just kind of like bring it in. I'm not sure if you have anything more to share or would like to ask.
Yeah, I think I've asked most of the important questions I think I've had. I'm sure there are more. And as you said, it's evolving, right? It does change. Sometimes it's hard because, yeah, it's just, and to be okay with it, right? It's just, yeah. But normalizing it is the first step. I do believe, I think by normalizing, I mean just people sharing their grief, people sharing their loss. And not, even if it's uncomfortable, creating a space where people can do that. I think that should be our utmost priority at this point. Yeah.
I agree. I think that's how you become a friend, is normalizing it, create that space, and just allowing the opportunity for more curiosity. And when you have sympathy, to really be in sympathy and empathy towards that person, to be more inviting, because I think for us, being a friend is just someone that you can connect with, have that full relationship with, grow with, and just have lots of dialogue. And when that doesn't happen, then the friendship can kind of dwindle down in a way, instead of, building more of a trust and more of a deeper relationship with somebody in that aspect. So thank you, Nissi, for joining me. If anyone here would like to comment below on what you think it is in regards to being a friend, or subscribe to my YouTube channel, definitely do so. Look out for my next video when it comes out. I'm still working on the details of that, but comment below. And again, I want to thank Nissi so much for joining me. And I hope that everyone has a great rest of your weekend. Bye.